And that is actually the flip side of the internet, because one is good that we're staying connected to each other. We're not fully isolated, which helps to appease us. But then on the other side, like the bad side of it, is that this overflow of information, overflow of people's anxieties, unfiltered, undiscerned, scaring tactics from the media, and much, much more makes us also more anxious, right? So it's like, oh, how do we manage all of that?
But I think the desire for information, that compulsion that a lot of us are feeling to look at the news and check the headlines and see what's going on, I think all of that is just a desire to try and create a bit more certainty. That belief that if we just know enough, we can figure this out. We can figure out what this means, how long it's going to be. But because there's so much out there and it's all contradicting, it's not doing the job. Information is supposed to help us learn and understand something, and it's just having almost a counter effect.
Welcome back. We are on today with Sarah Dosanjh on the Too Old for This Shit podcast. I'm Angie S., the founder of angies.com. Link in the show notes, where I'm a health expert and health coach. If you want to work with me, you can get in touch via the website or email me directly at hello@angie-s.com. So if at the moment, if you need something fun, distracting and uplifting, here are some episodes that you can tune into. Past episodes such as episode number 2, Turned On, episode number 3, Be Bold, number 4, Bounce Back, episode number 10, Don't Be Awkward, Be the Misfit, episode 19, Inside the Mind of a Pro Dominatrix, episode 20, Surviving Christmas, episode number 21, 101 to Manifesting in 2020. So I guess we could all use a bit of that. Episode 25, Teach Me About Pleasure. And so just before we go into this episode, please share this podcast with your friends, rate, review, subscribe to the show on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, whatever way you can show love in any of the other platforms you listen to this, please do it. It's absolutely free for you to do. It takes 2 seconds and it absolutely means a lot for me to be able to carry on this show. It is one of the ways of how you support podcasters is by doing all these things. And when you share with your friends, if they listen to it, it increases as well the amount of people who listen to it, and that's what sponsors look at. So I would really, really appreciate it. So today I want to talk about how the way we relate to food may have changed for many of us at the moment. But we actually end up covering a few more topics, like how we're handling the news and how we feel about this new normal, and how we feel for our families that we can't visit, or friends that we can't visit. So let's begin. Well, welcome back, Sarah.
Hi, Angie.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for asking me back.
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved the episode that we did a few months back. It was episode number 8, so it's going back now, because I think now in the 30s now. So it's episode number 8, and it was called "Is it an eating disorder or a diet?" And so I wanted to have you back on at the moment because, for context, we're recording on the 28th of March, 2020. So I wanted to talk to you about how these times with the COVID-19, all of that going on, how it's affecting how we are relating to food, how we manage our emotions and anxieties, and what we can do about it. Mm-hmm. So before we dive in, and for those who don't know you yet, could you please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Sarah Dosanjh. I live in West London, and I am a psychotherapist, and I specialize in helping people who are struggling with binge eating and body image struggles.
And I guess, just to give context to our conversation as well, because it may vary depending where someone is in the world. But so here in London, in the UK, online groceries, they may as well be cancelled. But 3 to 4 weeks waiting time, and as you can even get a time slot. I haven't tried them all, but I hear that's how it goes for many others too, in London anyway. So at least now they're reserving and prioritizing those who are vulnerable and can't leave the house for 12 weeks. So at least there is that, which is absolutely fantastic. And I guess the reason I bring this up is because obviously a lot of us are facing having to go to the grocery store and see, I haven't been in a few days, so who knows what it's like now. But in certain stores, it can be quite demoralizing and it's actually heartbreaking sometimes to witness. But so, so for a lot of people, depending where you want to dwell, we still have to go to the stores or find neighbors who can do that for us. So, and some stores are great in keeping fresh food on the shelves. Like Lidl has been absolutely amazing where I live, and like making sure people are not overbuying, they're really limiting purchases. They've been doing that for a while now. But things like toilet paper, soap, toothpaste can be a bit much harder to get sometimes. So, but my message here before we start is that, because this is part of also of mental health and like, how we feel in our anxiety, and this can all be adding on to how we eat, is that if you tell someone to stay home and you don't live where they live, don't comment, that's not you, Sarah, just like in general, because I had like two friends, one in France, one in Canada. Situation is different from them, saying to me, stay home, because they saw me like trying to buy vegetables in the store. And I know they said it because they care. But even when I explained, they either like totally ignored it or went, pretty please, you have to stay home and that's it. My thought was like, you know what? I didn't say it obviously, but my thought was like, bitch, then you send me food, And at the time when they sent that to me in London, probably the UK, I don't know, but in London anyway, non-key workers were still made to go to work, having to get on the tube, get the bus. Like the speed of lockdown policies varied in different countries, even for one and the same virus. So like, let's not try and shame people to give us a full sense of control or make them sound like selfish monsters when all they're doing is the only thing they can do. Okay. So, because all of this sort of all add up, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who got messages. And I said messages, it was two, but which is fine. So you posted something on your Instagram, Sarah, which, it was around this notion of that we are currently living in a bulimic society. And I thought it was so on point. Absolutely loved it. Would you be open to just like talk a little bit about that post that you wrote and what you mean?
Sure. First of all, I feel like I really need to give credit to someone I know via Instagram who goes by Fractured by Alice Marsh, because it was a conversation we were having and it was an observation she made. She made this throwaway comment about that the world was behaving very bulimic at the moment, as in we are binging on all this information that's out there and everyone's trying to purge it back at people. And we see it, people are doing it with their anxiety because their anxiety is building up. And then people are trying to expel it. And the way that some people do that is by going onto things like social media and pouring it out there. But also a lot of the time it's happening in their relationships, in their lives, through WhatsApp groups, just through calls and texts. And lots of people, we're all seeing it now, how everybody we know is responding to this. And a lot of people are getting a lot more contact from people that we haven't had before as well. So we're taking on a lot of people, or we're at least being exposed to other people's anxiety while we're trying to manage our own. And that can have a compound effect that can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. And like in the post, how you explained what she was telling you was that, the bulimic side of it and the purging was that we are absorbing so much and then just like, verbally just like purging it out on friends, like through text, WhatsApp, and, what you mentioned now. And I thought that was so interesting because it is really what we're seeing. It's like sometimes, we're having now to say, I've had to say to someone, I'm restricting my COVID news intake to like limited stuff. Do you mind if we don't talk about this? Like, can we just like, because they send like scary videos, or, all kinds of stuff and things that are not necessarily adding to the conversation or adding to the awareness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These are the conversations we need to be having with people in our lives, because we have such little control over what arrives in our phones. In these messages, we can't, it's already there. So unless we have these conversations with people and set up our expectations, or just asking them for what we need, or perhaps in this case what we don't need, in order to protect ourselves, because some people, that's just not how they process overwhelming anxiety. They don't want to go and purge it out, but then it's even harder when other people are doing it to them. So we're all responding differently. So I think there's a majority, I think, who are doing these sort of purging behaviors when it comes to anxiety and when it comes to information around corona. And there are other people that are much more, the word is guarded is not the right word, but like they're much more like they just want to keep their information and just hold everyone else's back. They don't need other people to hear whatever's going on for them. They want to process it more privately.
Yeah. And I think it's also respecting the choices that we make. So, we can, so for me, like I get it, any information that I need to have, I have it from research papers or publication from like Harvard, Oxford, World Health Organization, and I'll look at the NHS website. And charts, I'll go to one called like Information is Beautiful. And even then, I haven't gone to most of them in a little while because especially like research, that there's sort of stuff they can't, it takes time for stuff to be written. So, but any article and stuff like that. But I think it's that fine line, a bit like with food, is like, is it like a healthy intake, so good awareness, or are you completely binging on information, like completely binge eating, wanting to know everything, and then what do you do with that afterwards? And it's like how we so go on.
No, I was going to say, and this is a worldwide crisis.
Yes.
There's unlimited, like I think literally unlimited information you could be accessing right now.
Yeah. And so and that is actually the flip side of the internet, because one, is good that we're staying connected to each other. We're not fully isolated, which helps to appease us. But then on the other side, like the bad side of it, is that this overflow of information, overflow of people's anxieties, unfiltered, undiscerned, scaring tactics from the media, and much, much more, makes us also more anxious, right? So it's like, how do we manage all of that?
But I think the desire for information, that compulsion that a lot of us are feeling to look at the news and check the headlines and see what's going on, I think all of that is just a desire to try and create a bit more certainty. That belief that if we just know enough, we can figure this out. We can figure out what this means, how long it's going to be. But because there's so much out there and it's all contradicting, it's not doing the job. Information is supposed to help us learn and understand something, and it's just having almost a counter effect.
Yeah. No, it does. And I guess like, one of the thing with the information is also like how to read data, which is not a skill that everyone is being taught. And it's also like that's how like sometimes the figures they throw out, how to read the charts and stuff like that, it can sometimes have the opposite effect, because people are just like either like, everything is jolly or everything is terrible, but they're not. Then it's about how to read. And there's a whole there's people whose job it is actually to learn how you can be given the same amount of data, the same actual data, and turn it into completely different stories. And that's why a bit like what the media is doing, and it's not helping our anxiety. And I think that's why, like, I guess it's important to know like where to, it's hard, I think, I guess, because it's an addiction, isn't it? Going on Google, social media, and read all about this stuff. It's a bit like how we like to watch horror movies, for example, scary stuff. Is that a need for, I don't know, what is it actually? Maybe,
Well, social media is an interesting, because I think the news thing is this need to try and create some certainty in such uncertain times. But I think that the going on social media and absorbing what other people are saying on that is this whole like, how is everyone else dealing with this? And maybe through that I can learn how I need to deal with it. I think it's a way of us trying to process what's going on. I mean, I am still waking up in the morning and thinking, really? Is this really going on? Like, I mean, are we part of this big social experiment that we don't know about? And then they're going to kind of go, no, it's okay. We're just kidding.
I know. And it's almost like we're living in two worlds at one, right? And so never mind, we have this like collective anxiety, like worldwide almost, which is kind of like unusual. But then it's like, okay, so obviously we need to take precautions. We need to isolate, and for most people, it's not because they would die. It's just because the hospital doesn't have the resources so we have to stop, contaminating each other, all of that stuff, right? So isolating to help, our resource in the healthcare and protect those who are vulnerable. But so that makes sense, right? But then at the same time, it's like, it's almost like we've transformed overnight to like, if you see someone on the street, they're like a pariah, you're almost scared to
Yeah.
go outside, right? And it's like there's a part of me that's like, it's almost like a movie, and it's like, is this our future now, that we are gonna have to be living in a little capsule and our home, and then have very limited contact to others, and then in a way that's how we could be controlled, right? If you were to go like completely, I don't know, conspiracy theory ways, or I haven't even looked them up because I was like, I'm not gonna. But like, if it's like, it's between, where's the line between reasonable and then complete control? Because in a way now, I mean, how much more can we be controlled? I mean, I'm sure there is more ways to be controlled, but we have, most people have had to turn their life pretty much upside down in very little amount of time.
Yeah, life has changed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we don't know, we don't know how long these changes will go on for. And we don't know what's going to be the result of these changes.
Yeah.
How will we come out of it on the other side? This is such a short period of time that's passed compared to the potential of how long it might be.
Yeah.
What really is going to happen? Like, is there going to be civil unrest? Are people going to
I know.
get to a point where they just lose patience with it? I don't know. I really don't know. I think probably not. I think people will cooperate because they're seeing everyone else cooperate. So certainly at the moment, you're seeing everybody else doing what you're doing. There's no one in my life that I know of who's ignoring the calls for social distancing. I don't know anyone who is. That's going to influence my behavior. So yeah, it's just, and it's interesting you use the idea of like being controlled, that we are being controlled. Is that how you see it? Like, as if like the government are controlling us in order to control the situation?
Well, the thing is, they have to. I feel like, interestingly enough, I think personally, I feel like they were measures that could have been put in place earlier, like things like flying internationally should have been stopped way sooner. It should have been like, on a need basis kind of thing, need to travel basis, not leisurely, to areas that were, that that had already loads of issues with the virus. So I think they should have been more in control in some way. But again, I don't want to get into politics because I don't really follow it anyway. So, but I feel like there's certain things that don't make sense to me. Like the flying internationally. I know people who've been flying from areas that were seriously infected. They were offered to fly back to London, the UK. One of them is in London, flew all the way back to London from China, flew all the way back to London, got on the tube, went to his auntie's house, and I'm going to put in quotes because, how can you control? Self-isolated in his bedroom, where there's other people living in the house. Most of them are going to work. One of them works in an office. It's like, how much, like there's things like that doesn't make sense. I was like, when I was hearing that at the time, I was like, well, it can't be that bad then, really, because they're allowing people to fly over. But now that in the aftermath, I'm like, well, that was fucking stupid, because like, look at the hospitals now, So, and I think that the idea of control is more that it's not, I don't personally feel control, because I feel like I've kind of come to terms with it. Like I believe that we can really turn this around. We have to make sure that we take steps so that we all fall back in a good place. And I think there is such a great opportunity here to do that. And I think a lot of us, especially if we have day jobs, we're going to learn that we have to have our own back. We need to find alternatives. Look at how quickly all these other businesses have, transitioned online. You and I have been doing it for a long time. A lot of our peers have been doing it for a long time online. Everyone else catching up, right? So, but I think there's a lot of ways to make the most of it. But the side of the control I think I was thinking about earlier is that I'm thinking down the line. I'm like, this has become a new normal now, to fear each other on the street, to distance ourselves from people. Crazy, right? But it's just that, if things like that, you start to think about things like that, and you're like, well, where we have lost a part of our freedom. But I don't think they are maliciously controlling us, but effectively they can see now how quickly they can change our life around, and we have no say in it.
And I mean, it is exactly that. It's a loss of freedom.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard it being used in the word of control. And of course, control comes up in my work all the time with food.
Yes.
So just when you use that word control, I was just interested in where you were taking that. But yeah.
Oh, I knew that's what you meant. I knew. Yeah.
But yeah, loss of freedom, I think that's exactly how I feel. I don't feel like I'm being controlled. I feel like I am part of something bigger and I've got a part to play in this.
Right. Yes.
In my actions to stay at home and also in my work. So I'm feeling quite purposeful at the moment, I think. And I think that is what's protecting my emotional health, is a feeling of use at this time and feeling like there's something I can do.
Oh, absolutely. I think, that's exactly how I feel. I don't know how I would feel if I didn't have this podcast, or if I didn't have the health coaching, because I started to step up a little bit more and do stuff around that, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, never mind my own self-consciousness and security about being on video or whatever, although I'm still working on it. But you know what I'm saying? It's like all of a sudden it's bigger than you. And it's like, well, you're going to step up, or what are you going to do? And so I think, but, we are going to talk about the food stuff. But I guess, I think what I want to say about this, because I know probably like people who listen, they're like, well, I don't have a podcast, I don't have this, thanks very much, Angie, I'll be calling me the bitch now. But it's just, I think it's a great time to this is what I think we can use this to fall into a good place, because if we use this right, this is the time, like, you're not going to be commuting. I know, a lot of us have been made redundant, whatnot. There's a lot of stuff going on around, and reality that's really tough to digest. But I think now we are made to stay at home. We are made to actually skive a little bit, right? We are made to have to stay home. And so if you want to learn a skill, if you want to learn how to do Instagram lives, if you want to learn how to create a podcast, if you want to learn how to make videos, if you want to learn how to, whatever is a skill, photography, whatever it is that you think is going to be beneficial for your mental health now, and that you're going to be passionate about, that's also going to be something that could also lead you to an actual livelihood later on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I know you used the word skive kind of tongue in cheek in there, but skiving only feels like skiving when doing it is an option, when we're forced an option. And there's so much now going around about, using this time to read and to, personally develop and learn a skill and all of that. And I think there's quite a number of people who are feeling quite excluded from that kind of conversation, because they don't feel like that's where they're at all. And then it becomes like this other pressure that you should be using this time to better yourself, and you should be doing this and you should be doing that. And so, I think we just have to be quite careful around that conversation. I think there's a real opportunity for us to get better at being with ourselves, at tuning into ourselves and what it is that we want from life and what it is that feels good. And if that feeling or that sort of process leads you to learning something and this, that, and the other, which often it does, brilliant. But that's where it comes from. And people think they have to jump to doing the behavioral thing, doing the learning, doing it before like going in and sort of, I say doing the personal work. I don't mean to call it work, but like that idea of tuning in to what really feels important to you, and how can you use this time to have a sense of personal purpose, whatever that might look like.
Yes. And I'm glad you said that, because that's actually a very good point you made. And it's true. Not, otherwise it's forced. And I think you're right. I completely jumped a few steps there, and it's true. It is coming from, you may not know that today, you may not know it in a week or 2 weeks, but I think just taking, okay, the idea behind this, right? This is my theory, right? When things were normal, okay, before the virus, when things were normal, I used to always say, there's a reason why companies that you work for, that's my theory, it's not because it's fact, but there's a reason why a company you work for do not let you take more than 2 weeks off in a row of holiday, usually. I know there's exceptions around the world and who you work for, but in general, 2 weeks max in a row, that's about it, right? Otherwise, you're taking the piss for them in their eyes. And my theory behind it is that if you leave for more than 2 weeks for work, you start to realize that there's other things you want to do, and you may never come back. And I think there's an unconscious knowing of that with the employers. And you see that, in life. it happened to me. I never took holidays. And then one time I just went away for 4 weeks and I was like, came back and packed up all my stuff and then left for a year and a half. It was just like, it was like a binge holiday. But it's whilst working as well, but at least I was away. And I think that's the thing is, like you said now, is not about, you don't jump to the behavior. It's about, like you said, I think it is the personal work really, but without forcing it. It's like, take this time now that you don't have to have your boss in your ear, or you don't have to please anyone all the time and have to put on this persona when you go to work, because you have to be, obviously, you have to always, be your best self and whatnot, and professional and PC all the time. I know that's really hard. And so I think now it's like little by little, once you have to allow the fear and the anxiety to step in. I mean, I had that too. And it will come up, it will come back up and go back down. It will be in waves, like, there was like a few days was like, I couldn't read anything. And I love reading. I couldn't read. I couldn't find what I wanted to watch on Netflix. I kept flipping. I was like, no, 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 no. And that's usually a sign when I'm anxious,
Right.
because I can't settle down in anything. Yeah.
And how I might think of what you just said is that idea of being shaken out of autopilot. We live so much of life on autopilot in our routines, in our jobs, and even having 2 weeks holiday, it shakes us out of autopilot a bit because we're not on our normal schedule.
Yeah.
So we get to experience something different. And this is what's happening now. We're being shaken out of autopilot.
Yes.
And it's kind of a personal question for us each to ask ourselves, now what?
Exactly.
What do we do with that? Yeah.
And actually, like you said, like even on the 2 weeks holiday, we get shaken out of autopilot. And I know, like, it takes me a few days to get into holiday mode, right? So this is what's going on also, like we getting used to this. And then all of a sudden you'll be like, wow, okay. Like you said, now what? So I was wanted to ask you about this thing around this new situation, right? It's a big change. It's still evolving. I feel like we're a bit like mid-air up, like not down, but going up, like mid-air of like, nothing's peaked yet. It feels like, there's this uncertainty anyway. I don't want to make people feel more anxious, obviously, but it's like a change. And so how have you seen, because I've seen it for me, like, have you seen a change in whether it's your clients or friends or yourself, like change in how people are, especially food, right? Because food is such an issue now at the moment. Well, depending where you live, right? But there's this fear of not having enough food, and then there's the hoarding, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. Have you seen a change in how we actually even eat, whether it's your clients or those around you and yourself?
I think what tends to happen in situations of high anxiety and stress is that whatever our normal thinking and emotional patterns are, they become amplified.
Yes.
So if you're someone who is prone to restriction, that urge to restrict is likely to increase. If you're someone who's prone to binging, the urge to binge is likely to increase. If you are someone who often worries about having enough food, that's going to be really triggered at this time. So I don't think it's that people are responding differently. I think they're just responding in an amplified, maybe even exaggerated way compared to how they are perhaps when the world was normal.
Yeah, sure. But I think there's also the fact that because obviously there's like toilet paper, shortage, right, which is insane, right? But toilet paper, but there's also this idea of food, because there's not actually, I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say here, but it's like, for example, I mean, I love Lidl, okay? So I go to Lidl, and there is actually, when I go, I feel so, it calms me down to see like the fresh food aisle full, okay? That's one of the only stores I've gone in where I live, and I've got Sainsbury's, Morrison, Waitrose, but Lidl is like my safe place. And so I got this like, and obviously there's other stuff that they don't have, which is like all the other stores. But I feel like there is this fear still that, okay, I can only get it for a week, or because fresh food expires. I only have a very small freezer. I live in London, it's a single fridge. I've got the single person's fridge, like a half fridge, freezer. So I can't go in and like be freezing like 10 broccolis, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, there is this thing now that I've noticed is, that I've had to watch myself for, is that there's this part of me that's almost worried to cook too much, because what if I run out? And this is not wartime, okay? And it's not even the time of the Depression. My grandma grew up in the Depression. She had like, I've been told, I wasn't there, obviously, that her toys were stones. That literally, we're not there. That's not where we live now. Okay, we still have stuff. There's still people making money. There's still a lot of upsides still. But it's that idea. And I was just wondering if that maybe had a bit of a different impact, because maybe someone who would maybe have comfort eaten, maybe have that fear, or I don't know, because I've had both. I've done comfort eating and restricting, so I don't know.
I think, there's something, isn't it? Food is part of our survival system. And I think our brains are very sensitive to being deprived of food, which is why we know that restriction often leads to binging. But we also know that restrictive thinking leads to binging. So what happens, like most of us haven't experienced this in our lives, when the food actually isn't there, when we expect to see it there. And okay, so something interesting that's happened for me this year, I've just been off eggs. I think I bought eggs once this year. I do like them, but I just haven't really been enjoying them recently.
Yeah.
But now that I know that there's a shortage of eggs, all I want is an omelette.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So there is, and this idea, and I've been trying to, because I work from home, I've worked from home for a while. I've been trying to like get this habit of a lunchtime walk in. And, now I'm only allowed to do it once a day. And it's, this really precious thing. I can't wait to get out the door and go for that walk. So there really is something, the threat of something not being there, I think really does do something to us kind of at the deepest kind of survival drive level.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting, because when I've gone into other stores like Sainsbury's and others, where the fresh food wasn't there, like it did something to me. I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So that's why, like I said, Lidl is my happy place, because there's still stuff there. They literally, I go in and actually I breathe. I'm like, oh my God. And people are, I just, I've always gone there, and I just always, sorry, they're always so much nicer. But then the other stores, I wanted to ask you were saying about how restrictive thinking leads to binging. Can you explain that? I don't know what you mean.
Yeah. So, our brains anticipate. They're often planning. They're looking for problems so that we can solve problems and we can move forward. And the example that I always give is like, let's say that you had a big presentation that you were giving tomorrow to like a few hundred people. You could think about that presentation today. And even though the presentation is not till tomorrow, your heart might beat faster. You might get butterflies in your stomach. Your body is physically reacting as if it's happening.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And I think the same thing happens with restriction. So like even planning to restrict can create changes, hormonal changes in the body, as the body anticipates restriction and behaves as if it's happening now, which is why you'll get some people who never actually restrict, but every night they go to bed planning to restrict the next day. And then every day they're binging again. And that's when they're really, really trapped in the binge cycle.
Is it because the body's of like unconsciously telling you there's a famine coming, you better fucking eat?
Yeah, your ghrelin levels will be going up. Ghrelin is a fascinating hormone, because we think hunger's in our stomach, but it's in our brains, even though we experience it in our stomach some of the time. And ghrelin, its job is to make you think about food. Just like if you were angry and your body is flooded with angry hormones, you'll think more angry thoughts. If your body is flooded with ghrelin, you will think more hungry thoughts, which is why people cannot restrict their intake to any significant level without becoming obsessed with food. It's not possible.
Yeah, it's almost like a catch-22. Are you saying that because if you are thinking about restricting, so if you're consciously going, okay, I'm only going to have one tomato and then a slice of ghost cheese, and your body is like, whoa, fueling the ghrelin. Is what you're saying? And then the ghrelin is gonna obviously, and we know hormones are super powerful, right? So, that's how we our hormones betray us when we're dating too. We're like, oh my God, he's hot, it's nice. But yeah, so like okay, one tomato, a slice of goat cheese, and your body's going, well, alarm bell, but he's ghrelin. And then the ghrelin is there and you just can't help it. You just got to eat because the hormone is taking over. Is that what you said?
Exactly. And your leptin is going to be lower as well. Leptin's the hormone that tells you to stop eating. So it's harder to feel satisfied. So not only are you just going to eat and not restrict, you're probably going to eat more than you actually need, which is what's going to turn into a binge.
What would you say to people to how to manage this fear of the lack of food and, you know, what you're seeing in the shop, all this, how it affects us and how we then choose to eat? How do you... You know, and by the way, when I said tomato and goat cheese, that's something like I actually do make meals, but I've noticed like a lot less because, it's that fear of not being able to go to the shop. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, because we're living in uncertain and anxious times, what's happening when we're turning to food is we're not, I say not willing sounds a bit unfair, but we're scared of feeling anxious. But these are anxious times. So maybe we're kind of supposed to be feeling anxious now. It doesn't feel comfortable. So, you know, one of the things I think is really important when it comes to managing food at this time is being willing to feel your feelings. Because if you can feel your feelings, at least some of the time, you will reduce always reaching out. And if food is the main source of managing your emotions, then you can reduce that just by feeling your feelings. But also, like when they want to stop binge eating, what they do is they focus on trying to stop binge eating. But it's that whole idea that, what's that phrase? Is it energy flows where attention goes?
Yes.
That idea, like the more you're thinking about not binging, the more you're thinking about like binging in and of itself. Mm-hmm. So I often talk about recovery from binge eating as being a creative process. What is it that you want to create instead? You're talking about what you don't want, but what do you want? What does your relationship with food look like if it's not, if it's not binging? And the problem is for most people, what they imagine their relationship would look like if they weren't binging is restrictive. It's this super healthy, clean, eating in a calorie deficit, never eating too much. That's what they imagine that it looks like. And that's how we get stuck in the swing between sort of restriction and binge eating.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess like just to give like maybe in case someone doesn't understand what you were just saying about the clean eating is that we talked about this in the last episode we recorded, episode 8. Is it a diet or an eating disorder, where we basically discussed about how people who are like, quote unquote, the clean eaters, it's basically highly restrictive. It could be anything from being like a raw foodist or vegan, anything that sort of like restricts a lot of food and doesn't allow a lot of other foods can, for a lot of people, enable an eating disorder. It's like a disguise to an eating disorder. I mean, can we say something to someone like who's afraid to, like, because I'm like with me, like, let's say if I'm like, oh, I don't even know if I'll be able to, if I go to the shop, will there be something there? Or like, like almost like rationing how much I cook, the fresh stuff, the fresh food, like how would you, because that's the other side, right?
Yeah. Well, here in the UK, we have been reassured that there is plenty of food.
Yes.
We're not going to run out. Yeah. The issue being with the shelves being bare is people stockpiling because of their panic.
Yeah.
As such.
Yeah.
So at the moment, with the information that we have, there isn't going to be a food shortage. We're not going to starve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think the one of the biggest indicators of health when it comes to how you eat is like, what is your emotional response to what you're eating? Because you could be eating like all the foods that are considered superfoods, health, and this, that, and the other. But if there's a lot of anxiety around food, we know anxiety affects digestion and the gut and all of that.
Yes, absolutely
it's
agree.
Probably not going to benefit you in the way that you were hoping anyway. And likewise, if you're eating food that perhaps isn't as nutritionally dense, to try and use a neutral term, but you're eating it with a sense of appreciation and, searching for a way to feel satisfied by this food, then I think that that's going to be much better for you than the other. So it's not, to some degree, it's not about what we eat, it's about how we eat, why we eat, and how we feel about that.
Yeah, and that I totally agree. Like, one of my motto is that, stress is worse than junk food. And I don't even want people to eat junk food, but that's how I feel about stress, right? So, but to me, it's not like as if like when I eat the food, I really enjoy it. Like, I'll make the food and I love it. And I'm so excited because I've actually made extra effort to make it look nice because, for one, I don't want to go to the grocery store as much as I used to because just to look at it is demoralizing. I can't, I come home and I feel like emotionally drained, So I try and avoid it. So with what I have, like I cook with less fresh ingredients, but I make it nice. So I eat and I actually enjoy it. I'm not stressed about it, but I have noticed that this loss of appetite, and maybe it's because I'm at home, maybe it's because I'm not out. I walk, and then I exercise. Like I move a lot, and I walk because I go far to go to the gym. So I walk a big portion to go to my day job, although now I don't have it anymore, like most people. So, all of this stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that's changed. And so I think part of me, I don't know, like, but I know it's the collective anxiety that I would feel in the morning. Now it's better now. Now, actually, I'm starting to eat a bit more in the morning and stuff like that. But I could really feel it for a week or 10 days, maybe even. Like, I'd wake up and I'd be like zero appetite because I could feel I'd been absorbing too much, by going to the shops, witnessing to the news, 3 people's text, that kind of stuff, And it was just like, I need to completely disengage a little bit now to feel the strength and that, But I think I'm guessing that if I felt that way, I can't be the only one. And I bet there's other people who have maybe also lost, appetite. Yeah.
Appetite is a funny thing. I mean, we know that when people go through times of considerable stress, one of the first things that gets disrupted is the appetite. And for some people, that's losing their appetite. But for a lot of people, the appetite actually increases. And so there'll be people probably listening to this now who have found their appetite has gone up.
Yeah.
And they're going to be feeling really envious of you right now as somebody whose appetite goes down. They might come at you. I don't know, Angie.
Yeah.
But it's just because when the appetite goes up, when we're in that fight or flight state, digestion gets deprioritized. So for some people, that's a loss of appetite. But for other people, that feels really uncomfortable. So the solution that the mind and body does is let's eat lots of food, because if we eat a lot of food, the digestion is forced to start working. So it's a signal to the body to come out of that fight or flight response and feel a bit calmer and feel a bit more grounded. And that's how, eating more can be a way of managing anxiety. And it's understandable that we might do that sometimes, but when we're doing it to a point where it's really causing a detrimental impact on our well-being, our emotional health, and our physical health, that's the point when it's a problem that we might want to figure out what we can do with that.
No, absolutely. And I can understand that, I can understand that this, can obviously be annoying for some people to hear. But I do understand the binge eating, comfort eating. I mean, I don't know if I think I may have mentioned that when we last spoke. I put on 20 kilos in 3 months, which is like 40 pounds when I was, when I left home, at 18. And it took me. I mean, I haven't actually lost the actual weight. I've just gained the muscle. So on the balance, what's it called? The scale hasn't changed. So I understand and for years I struggled with, I was restricting during the day, and at night it was just binge fest. I mean, insane binge fest, I even put sugar on pasta bowls, and the pasta was like a big, massive portion. And I'd eat it in my room in shame so that people wouldn't see I was eating that much, like people I was living with. So I get it. Like, I understand the stress response. But I think, I guess maybe sometimes it also depends on the type of stress, and maybe in your life, maybe it's the stage in my life, maybe that's how I respond to stress now. And I think is that for me, I've always had someone who had full cupboards, because I know what it feels like to not be able to afford food, like the food that you want. And so I've always had, and actually too, like growing up as well, my mom always had like cupboards full. We always had full of food. Doesn't matter what happened. Food was in the cupboards, in the fridge. Okay. And so I think for me, the thought of not having access, what if they restrict us even more? I guess the control thing. But what if I have no choice? And it's like, that's just like, oh my God, what if I run out of spinach? What if I run out? I'm like, it's like, and it's that, and I know it's not reasonable. It's not realistic either. Like you said, it's not like as if tomatoes have stopped growing. We're still cultivating, there's still agriculture and whatnot. So, but I think, the fear of not having food is tough,
Yes. It has a psychological and emotional impact. We can't escape that. All we can do is notice what our responses are.
Yeah.
And then find a way to manage them.
Yeah. So, and by the way, just so not to sound dramatic, I could always buy food, but I had to make sure at this point, like there was a while where I had to like just eat out of tins, and that was all I could. I could have thought I was still eating, but it's just when you've experienced that, it's not fun. It's no fun. And I know I'm not. For some people it's been a lot worse. Actually, I wanted because you mentioned before about how people are managing the anxiety by sharing news and making others anxious. Okay, and when you first said that, when I read that in your post as well, I was just like, yeah, people need to stop sending crazy news to their friends. And then I went in my head, I was like, unless it's like really mega funny, inappropriate memes around working from home, Corona, or the show Love is Blind, like, I don't want anything else. But then I just realized maybe I should check with my friends that they're happy for me to send them, like really inappropriate, funny memes, but like just to, because maybe that actually has the opposite effect. Maybe that is making them anxious, me making light of it in those memes.
Quite possibly. You may be right. We're all, it's weird because in a situation like this, we're all in the same thing together. Yeah. So I think it can be really easy to fall into that trap that other people would want the same thing as we want in this situation.
Yeah.
And it sounds really basic human psychology, but I just think it's a really easy trap to slip into. And it's worth, if you think you're sending stuff out, like, to anyone out, if you're sending stuff out to people, I think it would be a lovely idea, really kind thing to do for people to just check in and say, these kinds of messages that I send, are they okay with you at the moment?
Yeah, because I was like, well, this is fun. So everybody wants a bit of fun. But actually, when I read your post, I was like, wow, I've actually been probably a bit of, self-righteous here. Because I'm like, don't send me like scary stuff. But maybe other people will find it as disturbing. Like I would find, stuff's disturbing. They may find that kind of humor disturbing to them. And and I didn't even realize that.
Well, a classic one that's been doing the rounds, isn't it? There's all these different ones about jokes about gaining weight when you're in. Have you seen any of these?
No, I haven't. I've seen one about snacks in quarantine, but no, I haven't seen about gaining weight. Oh, maybe.
There was one like with a very muscly man kind of dancing, and it's like day 1 quarantine, and then it jumps to day 21, and it's a man, a fat man dancing. And it's these kind of things so like there's a lot of these jokes going around, which I think a lot of people find funny.
Yeah.
But for people who are struggling with food, for whom like the weight gain is a real terror, a real fear, maybe there's body dysmorphia, maybe there's just a lot of anxiety about gaining weight. And also, like, what are fat people supposed to think when they see that? Are you all joking about looking like me?
True.
There's all these people that are going to be hearing this that are going to have a response to it, which is not going to be to enjoy jokes like that are going around.
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely cruel to see for like, that is cool. But I think the ones I really like are the ones where we're complete slobs, because I can relate to that. So it's like, one of them is like, one of them is, it says, your boss asking to jump on a video call. And there's a picture of a person like, when I say stomach hanging out, it's just bloated, right? Which, it doesn't matter what size you are. Bloatiness is what happens. It can happen to all of us. It's just basically just bloated and like t-shirt halfway up, like looking completely disheveled, hair completely undone. The look in the eyes is like, oh, for fuck's sake, really now? But that was funny. But things like making a quarantini, which is like a martini with vitamin C, that kind of stuff. But then obviously, again, that could have a trigger to people who are alcoholics, right? So, but yeah.
And I think we could end up, it's because then it kind of goes into the realms of censorship.
Yeah.
So, I'm all for like people need to share whatever they want to share. And then I think it's a tricky one. It is a really tricky one because there's always going to potentially be somebody who finds whatever you share difficult, whether it's positive, whether it's, talking about the difficult feelings, whatever it might be. And maybe to some degree, we all have to take some personal responsibility for, one, what we consume as far as we're able to.
Yes.
And two, if there are sources, people or whatever coming into our lives with this stuff, to ask them not to. And I think always say, like, I'm struggling with this information that you're sharing. Are you willing to not share this stuff with me anymore? And when you ask the other person if they're willing, they get to choose whether or not. And let's face it, if there's someone who cares about you, they're going to be okay with that.
Yes.
But you're giving them some choice. It becomes a dialogue as opposed to, don't send me that.
Yeah.
People feel a bit stung. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, it was stability, right? So for me, that's why, like, I choose not to go to certain, whether it's accounts or websites, because I know it's not going to be good for me. Right. So it's like, I don't tell them to stop doing what they're doing, because what they're doing is not criminal. It's not, it's great for a lot of people, but I choose not to. And I think it's the same. So you have to be, it's about being responsible what you consume. And then if people are pushing it into your phone, so like text and stuff, telling them, like, so yeah, I think it's important to push back, and it's important to allow the people to be as well. But
it's a balance. It's always a balance.
It is a balance. Yeah, it's a balance. I was wondering, like, do you have, because I know you've talked about this as well in one of your other Instagram posts, and I really like that. And I have another guest as well. She talked about this as well. And I think we call it parallel processing. So I think all of us are doing that anyway. We're all processing the situation whilst being there for each other, right? So I was wondering if, I want to ask this in two steps. So one is, what advice would you give to those who are helping others dealing with the situation, but also having to deal with it themselves because they're living it? So, and I'm thinking of people like health coaches, therapists, doctors, nurses, hospital cleaners, hospital receptionists, employees in grocery stores, the mailmen, and many, many more, okay, who are still working whilst dealing with this. Do you have any advice you would give?
Well, first of all, to all the people that are working at the moment to help keep the country running and to help against this, first of all, I just want to say a massive thank you from the bottom of my heart to everybody out there who is putting themselves at risk a lot of the time as well. And some of them have got, like, I've heard of stories of people who are key workers who have had to move out of home while this is going on because their partner's particularly vulnerable, for example, and they can't risk bringing it back to them. So there's some really enormous challenge, and some people are making some enormous self-sacrifices.
Yes, yeah.
The old adage, doesn't it? It goes on about putting your oxygen mask on before helping anyone else. And if you have any space or time to do that, then great. But sometimes that's not necessarily possible. I think one thing that has a protective factor is really recognizing the contribution you are bringing to, like, your country, to the people in it, to the future and the future generations. What you're doing now is more than what you're doing now. It kind of has an impact on where we go after this. And I think feeling purposeful, appreciated, and that what you do is important has a protective factor kind of for your mental health as such.
Yeah.
There are a lot of, and it's worth, I'm trying to think, maybe I'll look it up and give you something to put in the show notes, Angie, but there are a lot of organizations out there who are bringing together people who are offering to give psychological, emotional support to people in this position. So there's a lot of therapists that I know that are giving 1 or 2 hours a week free to
Yeah.
NHS workers and people that might need that. And like, who are the people in your life that support one another? Being part of a team, I think is really helpful. So I bet I've never worked in the NHS, but I was a police officer for 16 years. So I know what it's like.
What?
Did you never know that?
No, I can see you. I can see you in the uniform.
This is breaking news. I've never talked about this on Instagram or anything like that.
Wow.
But so I did it for long. So I know what it's like to be on the front line and be part of a team that really does start to feel like family. So I know that these people will be bringing an enormous amount of support to each other as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that we don't know how long this is going to go on for, but the idea, believing, is that it is finite. There is an end to it, like at some point, even if it means this virus spreads throughout every person on the globe, at some point, we're going to see a slowing down. And vaccines and treatments are going to be available. I have every confidence in that. Unfortunately, not as soon as we would like them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how about, some of us who live alone, others who live with one or two other people. And obviously all of these scenarios come with their own set of opportunities and hurdles, right? So they may, when it's like that, you may not have the sense of the family, like you said, like being in the front line, you pull together, you're exposed, and you're putting your life at risk in many cases. So, but let's say if you were at home, like any advice you would say to those who live alone or who are away from family, dealing with it whilst managing their emotions around their loved ones who live far away?
Yeah. Interesting you say loved ones who live far away, because actually at the moment it doesn't matter where they live. If they don't live with them, they could be in the next street or they could be in another country. They still can't see them.
Yeah, but I think if they're in the next street, worst case now, you can still go out. I mean, not that it's advisable, but I don't think you definitely can get a plane now. I mean, I couldn't fly home.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
But like you said,
what's that like for you, just knowing that you can't?
Do you know what's interesting? Because I hadn't actually planned to go home till the summer. So maybe, but for me, I was very, very worried for my mum because, she lives in a different country, all of that. But, I check in every day. I mean, there's a part of me that wanted to control her. Like I was like, have you bought food? Have you bought supplies? I was that person where I was the annoying one. And she was like, and I could feel I had to stop because I was making her anxious all of a sudden. And I didn't want that. And so I had to back away and have to trust that she knows what she's doing. And, and she's a very reasonable, sensible person. So, but it was the fact that I was just like, okay, how do I get her to just stay home? Right? Because she's over 70, but it's just like, there was that thought of, I was trying to keep her indoors from over here. And I think but to be fair, in my mind, it's like anything happens, I'm on the first plane over. I don't care. But I don't want to go out and expose her. So that's the other thing as well. I was just like, what if I have it and then I'll make her sick?
Yeah, I think that is the real terror, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's what all of us are dealing with, whether your mom is next door or live on the other side of the world, right? So it's the fact that you want to be with family, but what if you expose them, right? Mm-hmm. I would never forgive myself. I think I could live with that. But I don't know. I've sort of gotten used to it, also because we keep in touch daily. I feel okay now.
Yeah, but so I suppose in terms of like, just to revisit your question, on one hand, like, could there have been a better time for this to happen if it was going to happen, in terms of the technology we have and how connected we can be, that you can, speak to your mom at any time for pretty much zero cost.
Yeah.
In another country. So one, I think really utilizing all this technology that we have to be able to video call and this, that, and it's never going to feel the same. But also they found like that idea, again, I keep coming back to it just because I think it's so important, like having a sense of purpose. If you're on your own and you're feeling lonely, like to bring yourself out of your loneliness rather than hoping to alleviate your loneliness through someone reaching out to you. Who can you reach out to?
Yeah.
What can you do? Because to feel like we're doing one small part to make someone else's day a bit better, I think makes us feel so good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They've done this research with people who struggle with depression that like volunteering or doing something for someone else can really improve symptoms of depression.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's and also because when you're physically active or mentally active, it changes the focus on you. Because I think one of the worst thing we can do for ourselves is having too much time on our hands to think about ourselves. So at the same time as like this is good to just take a break from everything, and because it's doctor recommended for us to stay at home, right? We have to be home. So it's good to kind of like just take stock, but then obviously it needs to at some point change to something, because it is, so whether it's like you are, like you said, keeping in touch with people and checking they're okay. I mean, it's funny because even like what you were saying, even things like I couldn't believe that my friends and I were texting like this. We were like, "Hey, if you need any tins, if you need toilet paper," we were like going like, we could do a swap stuff, or let us know if you need anything. And it's like, and then the following text was like, "I can't believe we're even saying this," But it was the fact that we're not alone doing this. There's a lot of togetherness that can be had, and I think that's probably. Is that what you're saying? That's the way.
Yeah. And things like, so I'm looking at setting up a couple of online therapy groups.
Yes.
And I barely opened my mouth about it. I haven't even put a post on Instagram at the time of recording this. I mentioned it in one video, and within an hour, I've already got a couple of people saying, yes, please.
Yeah.
So I think people are hungry for this contact, especially like in a group setting, which I think makes it a little bit easier than sometimes the one-on-one.
Yeah.
So for people perhaps who are on their own, like what, I'm not just not everyone's going to set up a therapy group. Obviously, people aren't therapists, but like if it was binge eating or something you were struggling with, would you be interested in setting up like a little support group? I think people want it, but people really struggle with being the organizer.
Yeah, it's not easy to be the organizer.
I know, don't you and I know it?
Yeah.
And that's why. But if you are really struggling with that sense of feeling like you're not getting enough contact, consider it.
Yeah.
It might be a group of friends. It doesn't have to be like some kind of professional business thing or anything like that. Set up an online book club. And if you're the person who's running it, you can choose all the books that you want to read and have people to talk to about it,
Yeah. And now with Facebook, you can set up a group. It's all free now,
Yeah.
And also like for anyone listening, like if you have an interest and you're not sure where to go, like you can always like ask me, like contact me and say, do you know anyone who runs a particular group on this and this and that? And I'll have a look. Like Sarah and I are very much plugged into like the online world, and we get to hear about other peers, what they're doing, and it's all different stuff. And obviously like Sarah, now you have you're going to do your online groups, which you had them in real life before, right? And now they transfer online. Those are, if you have like, if you suffer from like binge eating, is it going to be around binge eating?
Yeah, so my groups are going to be on binge eating, but I'm running some courses for other therapists about how to set up online groups.
Yes.
So if people are interested in groups, I don't know, for anxiety or anything else, they can still let me know, because I can reach out to my network and see who might be doing it and see whether I can help them find a group.
Exactly. And whilst we're plugging, we're plugging for other people. I'm still at concept stage, but I'm making this program. And I had this in mind, especially for those who I call them the 12 weekers, those who are like have to stay home for 12 weeks. But anyone who's have to be on lockdown for 2 weeks, less or more, you're welcome anyway. But it's going to be, I'm going to be helping on, what to do with food, like planning, health in general, breathing techniques, I'll tap into all the stuff I've learned, with pharmacology, immunology, genetics, physiology, biochemistry. And I have guest speakers, including like Sarah, you've already said yes. And like, questions around, like, if you're struggling with food, whether it's like restricting or binge eating or just anxiety like that, around that. And then I have other speakers, around, if you're living with your partner and you find it a bit difficult to live in close quarter, sexy time, all this sort of stuff with your partner, life coach, business coach. I'm still at concept stage, but those are things I think a lot of people are out there there are going to be groups that, you can go and listen to. And if none of what we've said is appealing to you, just let us know and we can probably find someone who would be more aligned to you, for what you need. So.
And I think it's a great idea what you're doing. And especially like focusing it at the 12-week, because I've got one friend, actually there's two people in my life who have been told they have to stay inside for the 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really tough. One of my friends, like her fiance, they're supposed to get married in May, so the wedding's cancelled.
Yeah, that's all
And
cancelled.
her fiance is staying in another room because he's still got to go out to work. He's an electrician.
Oh my God.
So really challenging that they're living in the same house, but they can't even get too close to each other.
Listen, phone sex. There's going to be a lot of phone sex going on, video calls going on. There's going to be a lot of things going on. Broken sex toys, apparently. It's going to be also. Oh, but also the thing is, for other people, it's also lack of libido, right? In this time, so that is also something that because obviously the stress, can affect us differently.
Yeah, and being cooped up with your partner all day.
I don't know how I would.
Yeah, it's going to be quite challenging, exactly, to kind of feel in the mood, perhaps, for a lot of people.
Yeah, you see them all the time, and then you'll see them, you'll be there when they're farting, picking their nose. I mean, I don't know if you're single, Sarah. I mean, I'm single, and I think we're in good shape, I think, if we're single living alone in a way, because we don't have to be dealing with someone else's pandemic trauma. So, like I said, in every situation, there are good stuff and hurdles, but...
Exactly that. But yeah, I mean, some families and people, apparently the divorce rates in China have shot up.
Oh no, there's going to be divorce season 100% in the summer. I'm pretty sure. I think if people here are still together after, like, because I think it's going to be another 2 months, they say, or who knows, of like, social distancing. If people make it through this as a couple, if you believe in marriage, you may as well get married, because honestly, if you've survived this, you're good to go. But I think a lot of people are going to all of a sudden be in a relationship, really be in a relationship. And it's going to be super challenging. And I said divorce season is coming up. It sounds mean. Obviously, I'm kind of making fun of it a little bit. But it is really that. I'm not surprised that in China it's gone up.
Yeah. It's just... And difficult, particularly that's what's happening with my clients who are struggling with binge eating. Those who live on their own are feeling particularly isolated, and binge eating really thrives in isolation. But likewise, some of my clients who are living with family and partners are finding they've not got their own space. So they're really kind of struggling with wanting to binge and not having the space for it even to be an option, which then makes it feel even worse when it doesn't feel like a choice.
Yeah, because because obviously I'm guessing they're hiding, right, when they're binge eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also even just the going to the shop, like the logistics of going and getting the food at the moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, imagine, like, that's the thing as well. Like, that's another logistic, is that when you binge eating, you have to buy a lot more. And now, like, how much do you buy, right? There's this whole thing going on in your head, I'd imagine, if you are binge eating and you're like, well, how much do I stock up? And,
Yes. And the stress of having surplus food in the house. There's a lot of people as well. Yeah, they don't keep a lot of food in the house because, they're struggling with their eating.
Yeah.
And now they're kind of being required to. So, yeah. And then enormous amount of guilt as well. Like, people who struggle with binge eating seem to have like more guilt, carry more guilt, an enormous amount of guilt for struggling with binge eating. So in a time like this, the fact that they're struggling with something like this has just increased the guilt. And talk about the amplification, has just amplified the guilt like tenfold.
Why? Because they feel like there's not enough for others if they binge eat. Is that what you mean? Or like
there's part of that, and just feeling guilty for having a problem like binge eating when something like this is going on, because it then becomes this comparison thing. Like, look at all the problems that some people have now, because people who've lost their jobs, people who are isolated, people who are not going to survive this, all of that. People are seeing all of that going on, and they're really in a lot of pain with their binge eating, but they're judging themselves for having the problem of binge eating when other people are having these other problems, because they're comparing their problems and then thinking that their problem isn't valid.
Yeah, and I think that's across the board for everyone who has, suffers from something. Yeah. Is that they're being, they feel like they can't express it anymore because in comparison to everything else. But I just wish that people didn't feel that way, because no matter what's going on in the world, it's if you're dealing with something, you're dealing with something, and that's okay to have it. You're allowed to be struggling with binge eating, and you're allowed to to have to not know how to manage the guilt and all of that. And I think it's totally totally justified. It's legitimate. What you have, it's not something that you are doing on purpose. So no, I think yeah, it saddens me to hear that. I understand. I know what you're saying, but I feel like no, I feel like it's important for people to know that it's okay. Whatever it is that you're struggling with, whether it's anorexia, bulimia, whatever it is, it is you have the right to have it and to talk about it and to reach out to someone. Doesn't matter what it is.
And I aggressively agree with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If we want to make this place, turn this into something, good and better, and try to, I guess, like manage doing damage control of how it come out, we cannot censor people. We cannot shut them down because that's just, we've seen what happens when we do that in the past, and it's just not good. We just need to just let people, do what they deal, I think, yeah. I was just thinking something. I was like, but even like the nurse in the ER, she probably still worries. Maybe she has thoughts about, I mean, it puts things in perspective, obviously, because they're dealing with like emergency, but it doesn't mean that she can't at some point be, or he, worry about their partner at home, what they're doing, or having worries about their relationship. Like all of this stuff is still real. It may have less of a focus, but it's still there. Everyone is dealing with stuff, so yeah.
Yeah. There's something about the situation being the same, but I don't think the differences are still there. We're all so different in the uniqueness of our challenges as a result of this global crisis.
Yeah, even though it's the same. Yeah. Even though it's one crisis, but how it shows up for people is different.
Yeah, the impact on our lives. Someone's got a relative somewhere that they are desperately worried about. Someone else is dreading the thought of being cooped up with their partner and kids, and someone else is dreading the thought of being alone. There's so many different, and it's very easy to kind of compare and try and figure out how we should be feeling rather than just letting ourselves feel what we're going to feel.
Exactly. Look, we're all human. We're all supposed to have feelings. Fine. It's like one of those, like, let's all let each other have our feelings, and because that's how, if you let them out, that's how we'll process them. That's how we'll get better. So absolutely, I agree with you. So Sarah, is there anything that you'd like to add to our conversation before we round up?
I think there's just something I would want to say about that. I think at the moment there's this sense that life has been interrupted, that somehow life is on pause while all of this is happening. But that's just not true. Like, life is happening and life is changing for most of us. And I hear people talking about when this is over, about things going back to how they were. And I'm not sure that that's what's going to happen. And we mentioned parallel processes earlier. It's a little bit the same. Actually, I was thinking when people are going through eating disorders, I think people get stuck in their eating disorder because they're trying to go back to how they were and how things were before the eating disorder. But the eating disorder changes you and irreversibly. So you have to go through the other side to kind of create something new. So I suppose what I would just want to say to the listeners, I think, is that idea that this is life at the moment. And it's a chance to just try and craft it into something. I'm not talking about these big pressures of what you should do, but I think this is a time for rebuilding on a personal level, let alone the economy, which we're going to have to do in the near future.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's a bit like, if you've had a nervous breakdown, you can't expect to go back to the life you had before. You're going to look at things so differently. It's going to be a gift, but it's like you can't, if you're trying to go back to how it was before, you're going to be struggling because what you had before is what got you here. So
exactly.
You can't, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I love
and the idea that things can break us into, like, life can deal us these massive blows and we feel like we've broken into pieces. But actually, when we break into pieces, there's an opportunity to put ourselves back together a little bit differently, a little bit more consciously.
Yeah, and I think we'll be more interesting as a society as well with what we've learned through now. maybe,
Yeah.
a bit like, something's broken, like, an imperfect piece of furniture, made of wood. When it has little cracks in them is what makes them so unique and coveted, because they're not perfect. They're real. They're still living almost. And I think it's okay to have the scars but yeah, it's how we deal with it. Either do we make a lovely piece of furniture or do we smash it to the ground? Like we need to choose, right? So
yeah. And that doesn't mean we don't sit in the mess for a while and just cry about the mess.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean, that's
do
important
that.
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you need to get it's okay, but it has to be ugly for a little bit.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. It's like you gotta feel distressed and, sad, angry, all the feelings, disempowered, and then you're gonna get it, and then, and then you build from there.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sarah, I always ask the same 2 questions to all my guests, and I guess even when you guests come back, I'll ask again. See what they say now. So, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
I don't even remember what I said last time, but I think a really good lesson that I've learned, which would have been good to have learned earlier when I was 18, would have been that what people think of you always says more about them than it does about you. But that includes me as well. So like how I think about other people and how I might judge other people is always giving me more information about myself than it is about that other person. And I think that's really liberating, a really liberating concept. It stops me from trying to be what I think other people want me to be.
Yes. And also actually how we react to what people say to us is also is also an opportunity. Like if it triggers us, a good opportunity to see what it says. Like to me, I knew like what people said, and those 2 people, why it annoyed me. And I had to look into why it annoyed me, But yeah, like you said, like what people say about you, it's not about you, it's about them.
Yeah, and other people, but they're brilliant mirrors for us. I think that's how we increase self-awareness, by being really conscious of our own reactions, like you say, being like, what's going on for me that I'm feeling this strongly about whatever this might be? Because there's always something in there about us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
I don't put up with just, it's going to sound really broad, but to some degree, like doing things that I don't really want to do.
Yes.
For a long time, there were these things that I felt like I should do in my life. And then when I actually thought, well, these are not things that I want to do. I'd like to be the kind of person that does these things sometimes, but, I'm not. I would like to be the kind of person who's much more consistent in productivity, but I'm just not. I'm someone who goes in fits and starts. So I'll have a day of like flat out 100 miles an hour, and then a day where I'm just, vegging out watching Netflix on the TV. So yes, I think that's one thing that I'm over trying to. I think it kind of ties in with the first one, but trying to do or be a way that I thought that I should be.
But that's also being human, right? We're not robots. But it's interesting because I find you as being productive because you're always putting content out on your Instagram, interesting videos, interesting posts, like.
I know everyone says this, like, how do you find the time to do that? And I wish they knew how much time I spend doing nothing.
So I guess it's like in the day we are 100 miles an hour, you just recording loads of videos.
Yeah. So, I'll have a day like that. In a day like that, yeah, I'll do a lot of stuff all at once. And then I'll drop, and I'll need a day where I just don't do much. And that idea of kind of like, it's okay to stop. And that actually when I'm doing nothing, in a funny kind of way, it's not that nothing's happening. It's really what I need to replenish my energy into.
Yeah. It's actually when I do nothing, that's where I get my ideas from.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I'll be doing the dishes on my way to bed. I'm like, oh, wait. I was like, what was that? Yeah.
I had the best ideas in the bath.
Oh, yeah. I wish I had a bath. Yeah, I love baths. Yeah. I get them in the shower as well. Like, yeah. So, Sarah, can you please tell us where can people find you?
Sure. Well, I go under the handle The Binge Eating Therapist pretty much everywhere. So that's what I am on Instagram, on YouTube, and on Facebook.
And what's your website?
My website is thebingeeatingtherapist.com as well. And I did write a book called I Can't Stop Eating, which is about how to break free from binge eating. And that's available on Amazon. Although with the whole coronavirus thing, I don't think they're delivering until May. So you might want to get it on Kindle.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Apparently it's a non-essential item. I don't think they thought that through.
Yeah. No, they haven't thought that through. Yeah.
I was kidding.
Well, thank you so much for today, Sarah.
Thank you, Angie. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, subscribe on iTunes, follow on Spotify, for all the other platforms. Whichever way you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram. I have 2 accounts. One is Too Old for This Shit Podcast, and the other one is Not Too Old For with the number 4. Links in the show notes. See you next week, and until then,
using health inappropriately.